So again, just so it's on the video in case somebody misses it, right? This goes into L1, you find all of these. Brand Y will go into L2 and you find all of these. You just need to make sure when you go one variable stat that you go second 2 if you wanted to calculate everything for the values in L2. Okay? Okay. So just to make sure, right, I will start with brand X. So I will just show you that I've already gone ahead and typed in. Let me just see if I can make it a little bit brighter for you guys. I've already proceeded and entered the values, right, for brand X. And I've also done the same thing for L2, for brand Y, that is. So once you have everything entered, you're going to go stat, calculate one variable statistics, and then you got to tell one variable stats which column you want to use. And if you use L1, you see that your average is 5.74, and it's okay to state it like this when we're dealing with statistics, even though sometimes you want to round to a whole number, right? If you're talking number of items, it's okay to state it as a decimal, okay? So 5.74 years, because you may have heard the stats that in Canada, right, on average, families have like 1.2 children per families, right? It's kind of like just a number that they use to compare to other countries perhaps, or maybe one province to the other. It could be that one province has like a 1.6 average, the other province has 1.2, so the government can see, wait a minute, like they probably will increase the immigration to a certain part of the country just by looking at that, right? So even though it sounds weird to state it as a decimal, it's acceptable in statistics, okay? Because it's something we use to make decisions. Median, I just scroll down and it's right there, 5.75, very close to my average, okay? And the mode, I'll do the mode right away. For mode, you need to arrange your data set. So you go stat, we're going to sort, and I'm going to sort L1, just L1 for now. Once I have that, I'm going to go back to L1 and see if there's anything that repeats, right? So far nothing. There are 2 5s there, so that is for now my mode. Oh, there are 3 5.7s, so that's my new mode now. And that is it. Or yeah, 6.4 shows up twice. So you kind of just go through and it's 5.7 that shows up 3 times. So that's my mode, right? 3 occurrences. I know it's hard to read, just hear what I'm saying, right? 3 occurrences, just to make sure that that's why we picked it, right? And then the range, you just take the smallest. So that shows up in 2 places. You can just go to the first number and to the last number on your table. But let's quit this screen and I'm going to scroll up to when I call that function. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to call one variable stats. I just copy that. And notice that the minimum is showing up right there where my pencil is, right? It actually tells you the lowest value, which is 3.1. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, it's the highest values here. So you can actually find the range quite easily like this. I don't think I talked about it yesterday, but there it is, right? So the min, so take the max, subtract the min, right? And you get a range of 5.1 years. So we came up with the MCTs, the measures of central tendency for brand X, and we also came up with the range, right, which tells us how far apart, how spread out data is. On its own, doesn't tell us a whole lot. So let's move on to brand Y now. Okay, so I'm going to block this. And so in no particular order, right, you could arrange right away, but I'm just going to go up, or stat calc if you want, call one variable stats again, go second 2 to call to find the average and everything of the second one. So it's 5.72 years is my average, my mean lifetime, right? Because remember, these are lifespans of car batteries that we're talking about. So the data considered here is the lifespan, like how long they last in years, right? Could be in months, right? In this case, it's just years. The median, I will scroll down, and that's also 5.75. And I will note this. Median is the middle. Half of batteries will have a lower lifespan, half of the batteries will have a higher lifespan. That is the definition of median. And I don't know if you remember me saying this, but we have 30 data points that we're considering. That's an even number. So the system, the calculator, actually found the two middle values and finds the average of those two to give you 5.75. So 5.75 is not technically part of our data, but it indicates the middle. Okay, so just so you understand that. So there it is, 5.75 years. Mode, I will go ahead and find that. Before I do that, I will sort the second column, right? And then I go stat, edit, and now I'm going to look at this one. And I just scroll. Oh, two 5.4s there. You see that? I'm going to keep going. Two 5.6s. So right now we have two modes technically. There's two 5.7s, three modes, two 5.8s, four modes, and there's the 5.9 that appears 3 times. So that's the one that is your only mode now because it shows up 3 times. So 5.9 years is our mode, right? The range, I realized that I should have done that first. So what I'm going to do is show you that step again. If I were to call that, I just copy it, right? I just go up and copy it so I don't have to call for it. I'm just going to go, right, 7 minus 4.5. 7 minus 4.5. And that gives me 2.5 years. Okay, interesting, right? So if you think about it, the mean, median, and mode for both is very close. They're very close. They're both, like if you were to compare brand X with brand Y, you're like, well, they're both kind of the same, 5.75. What do you notice though? Where do you start to see something that should ring a bell, that should worry you when it's time to buy one over the other? And I will highlight that. 5.1 years, 2.5 years. So brand X, you have a bigger range, right? The battery that lasted the least and the longest, right? That difference is bigger than for brand Y, where it's just 2.5 years. So they both have, on average, the same lifespan, but there's a bigger discrepancy where you have quite a few batteries not performing very well on the low end and quite a few batteries outperforming. Versus brand Y, you're more consistent. You don't have the sour, like the lemons, we call those the lemons, right? And you don't have like the ones that far outperform, so you're more consistent, right? So I don't know if you see that. We will graphically represent that in a bit. But that's where range comes in. It tells you how spread out your data is. And for the most part, you want the range to be small, okay? When you're making decisions, when you're looking at an athlete, the smaller your range, the more consistent you are as a player, right? It's easier to deal with the things like deal with the items that need to be improved on because you're pretty consistent. You're not all over the place where we don't know why some days an athlete is performing very well and then another day you're not performing well. What's happening there, right? So it's harder to deal with that. Okay, so I hope I'm not just talking to myself here. Hope you're understanding this. Okay, I'm trying my best. Statistics is important, but it's sometimes you kind of hear things over and over again until it kind of sinks in. Okay. So A, determine the 3 measures of central tendency for each brand. We've done that, right? Draw a line plot for each brand. Label central tendency. This is new, okay? But this is going to come back quite often, and it's not that complicated to do. So we're going to do that right on this paper. If you're at home, you want to do this on loose leaf, okay? In fact, everything we've been doing, you want to call that page 4, right? And you should have done, brand X, written all of this down, brand Y, written all of that down, right? And then B, we will create a line plot for each brand, okay? So grab a ruler. Rulers in this case are going to be very, very helpful. So we're going to just draw a line right about there. I'll just draw a number line like this, up to 10 maybe, right? That's going to be brand X. And just a bit lower, I'm going to draw the same line again. You're with me? I think you can handle it. Okay, so that represents a number line. And on that number line, we will try to fit our data points on. Okay, so this is B here. We're answering B. And so this technically continues both ways, right? So we kind of just say that's what it is. And so we will say that this number line represents the lifespan in years, lifespan in years. And we're going to call this, maybe we will just go here, brand X. And here we'll go brand Y. Okay. So what you want to do here is kind of consider the lowest value and the highest value and just find an appropriate scale, right? So for brand X, and I want them to be the same, okay, just to make the point as to how spread out data is. So we're kind of going to go up here and see that our lowest number, look at my fingers, right? On the screen here we're presenting, the lowest number is 3.1. So if I were to start at 3 as my lowest, I'm taking care of the lowest value for both data sets, right? Because 4.5 is higher yet even than that. And then the highest is 8.2, right? So I'm thinking if I were to go, you can go from 1 to 10 if you want, that's okay. I think I'm going to go from 2 to 9 or something like that. I think that I will be able to fit on here. So I start over here. Let's go back here. I'm going to ask you to grab a ruler. And it's important to kind of have a bit of a consistent, you can just eyeball it if you want, but I'm actually going to use my centimeter marks here. So I'm going to just say, because if you want to see the difference in range, it's important that you are pretty accurate because we're going to kind of compare both of them. And then I guess I will just do this with a ruler, just kind of transpose this over to here, right? And I will do the same thing for my brand Y. So I grab my ruler again, I kind of hold it just under, and I make my line plot. Line plot, it really is what it says. It's a line with a bunch of dots on it. Okay, so I should have checked this ahead of time, but if I start with 2 here, right, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so plenty of space. So I can probably start even with 1. Okay, so I'm going to start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, no problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you should have 2 lines, ideally one on top of the other with the same increments, because we're dealing with battery lifespans, right? So it would be nice to do them both with the same scale to compare. Now, once you've done this, I'm going to wait a little bit, but I want you to go to L1. And both of them should be arranged at this point, all right? They should both be arranged. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to shift over this way and have my calculator on this end. And so basically, I go through my list of values, and for every value, you can make a dot, or you can make an X. It's up to you. I think I'm just going to make dots. I think some of my answer keys you'll see X's, but that's okay. So 3.1 would be not right on 3, it would be just over. So make a dot for that value, okay? 3.3 is just about here, and then I just keep going. The next value is 4.1. The next is 4.3, so approximately, right? Oh, I kind of made a mistake there. 4.3 would be, right? And halfway would be 4.5, sorry. Right? This is 4.5 here, so 4.3 is right about there. And then 4.6, 4.7. Oh, I'm in trouble there. So I have to redo that. Come on, Mr. Dirksen. What's happening there? Well, online is not my best performance. Okay, let's try this again. 4.1 is right about there. Let's make smaller dots. 4.3 is right about there. Again, approximate is fine. 4.6, 4.7, 4.8, 5. It's exactly on 5. Those I'm going to be a bit pickier on. So don't worry so much if you're not exactly on there. And then another 5. Watch this. You start stacking them. If you have repeating values, they're stacked. Okay? And then you have a 5.1, which should be right beside it. 5.2 right beside that. Then you have 5.5 right about halfway. 5.7, another 5.7, and another 5.7. So you have 3 stacked on that. Right? Then you have a 5.8, a 5.9, a 6, a 6.1, a 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, and another 6.4, 6.6, 6.8, 6.9, 7.3, 7.5, 8.1, 8.2. That's it, right? So technically there should be 30 dots on that line plot, okay? And I normally have a nice like grid with this, but you're at home, so I kind of have to make this work. But the main point here is to just kind of know how it's done. Usually on an example that I give you, you'll have a bit more space to fit everything in. But nonetheless, it still should show, that's what you should be seeing there. And emphasis on the stacked values, right? You've got 2, 3, and 2 here. Let's do the same thing for brand Y. You can start from I can start from 7, right, and go backwards, but I think I'm going to start with the lowest. I'm just used to that. So 4.5 is right about here. 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, and another 4.9. There's a 5. There's a 5.1. So I'm making the dots a little bit too big, perhaps. 4.3, 4.4, and another 5.4, a 5.5, a 5.6, another 5.6, 5.7, 5.7, 5.8. Yikes. I think I have to redo that one. Sorry, guys. I'm writing too big. I have to make it smaller. That's my problem. So this is I'm going to go back to I was at a 5 here. Then I had a 5.1 here. So I have to go smaller. 5.3, 5.4, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, another 5.6, 5.7, 5.7, 5.8, 5.8, 5.9, 5.9, and another 5.9, right there, 3 5.9s. There's a 6, another 6, 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.5, 6.6, 6.8, 6.8, 7. Aha. Okay. The biggest thing I want you to notice here is the spread. That's what I want you to focus here by far. Okay, that's my most important things. If I see something like this, like the brand Y, trust me, I'm not gonna dig down and be like, wait a minute, is it 6.7 or 6.8? Like, did you put it in the right spot? Not gonna sweat that. I'm gonna sweat like big obvious ones, but don't worry about that too much, right? But when it comes to a line plot, what you need to do is make sure you add the mean, median, and mode. So if you go back to brand X, we have that the mean is 5.74, so it's right about there, right? 5.74 years. The median is 5.75, so I'm going to go here, median. And then the mode is 5.7. And the mode actually should land exactly on the tallest tower, right? Basically, 5.7 years. So basically just tell me the mean, median, and mode on that line plot, okay? Then we do the same thing for the bottom one, and let's start with the mode. That one is the easiest. Mode is 5.9. It's the tallest. Okay. My average is 5.72, which is right about there. I will tell you how the steps for this later on. 5.72, and the median is 5.75. Okay, so the median is right about there. How do I come up with about there? Because I'm looking 5 and 6. 5.75 is right about there. Right? It's a little bit more than 5.72. So there you have it. So this is B. The graph is B. All right. See, describe the set. The set's distribution describes similarities and differences. Right. So I will say this one has a higher range. More spread out. Spread out. Right? Higher range. It's more spread out. Therefore, more inconsistent. Right? Trust me, it says inconsistent there. This one has a lower range. Think like these are the same scales, right? You can tell that the range is smaller on brand Y compared to brand X, right? Lower range, clustered around the mean. So you're actually, if this is your average, everything tends to like gravitate and cluster closer. Could you have a better battery? Absolutely. There could be a brand Z that is probably even that could have a smaller range, even smaller, right? So then it would be even more clustered around the mean. Okay, therefore more consistent. Okay, so there are we could say that the similarities, right? I would say this about C. Both brands have similar MCTs, right? Both of them have very similar mean, median, and mode, right? Comma, however, brand Y has a smaller range, right? Brand Y is more consistent. What does that mean? In other words, most batteries, most brand Y batteries will last 5.75 years, or sorry, 5.72 years, right? What they claim the average lifetime is, because the data points are very close to the average, right? You don't have that big gap having some inconsistent. Kind of like an Amazon review, right? Sometimes you're like, oh, 4 stars. You click on it, and you've got the 1 star, the 4 star, the 1 star, the 5 star, right? I don't know about you, but when I look at those reviews, I'm a little skeptical, right? I'm a little bit like, I don't know if I want to spend the money on something that's a hit and miss, right? But if something has 4 stars and it's like between 3 and 5 or 4 and 5 or something like that, you're like, okay, it seems to be consistent. You might have a few ones, but they're just like people that are upset about something, right? And something didn't go exactly as they planned. So the same thing can be said, okay? D, based on these test results, which brand would you recommend? Okay, so it would be pretty obvious uh, in this case to say I would recommend brand Y, comma, as it is more consistent. What other factors should Paolo consider? This is just to make you think, or just realize in life, you don't always go by, oh, the range is smaller, therefore you should buy it. You also look at cost, right? Like if brand X, so I will just put that down as price, warranty, etc. Right? Like if brand X is a lot cheaper, like let's say it's like half the price of brand Y, I I would maybe be inclined to say, you know what, it's that much cheaper, it's worth the risk. Or brand X might offer a really good warranty. So you're like, you know what, yeah, it's a hit and miss, but they have a good warranty. They'll just give me a new one if something goes wrong, right? So it's just getting you to see that it's not always about the things that I'm teaching you. It's also, you should consider other factors as well. Maybe yeah, you don't have a store that sells brand Y next to you, so you don't want to drive an hour to get that brand, right? Because now you're wasting money too, and so forth. Anyways, that's that. So let's put this away. Um, this is the kind of stuff that I want you to understand. Like, how can you compare, right, data points by looking at the various factors, right? Um, I just don't want you, like, I can't go through every single example, but you could have had a brand, you could have had two different brands where the average lifespan of X is lower. Let's say the average is only 3 hours, 3 years versus 5.72. Then you say, okay, well, this one has a higher lifespan, but if this brand had an enormous range, right, where it's like hit and miss completely, then you might have still concluded that brand X is better because it's more consistent, right? So the consistency is what we're really going to focus on in this unit, right? It's important. Consistency is usually a good thing. All right, so put that away. Page 4. I in fact will add I will add a note to the notes to reference this page, right? Comparing. Yes, Kim. Is that just a mistake or comparing? Comparing different data sets, page 4, right? So let's have an entry there for that so you know. Kim, was that just an accident or did you have a question? Let me know. Yeah, no problem. All right. Here we go. Uh, Now we're going to graph a little bit more, actually create graphs out of data sets that were given to us. So we'll do this. We'll have this heading, right? 4 ways to graphically represent data. So that's a big heading here. So number 1, the first one would be a frequency table. / chart. And I will tell you right away what it looks like. Whenever you think of that or see that, you will have a table with 3 columns. You will have an interval. You will have a tally column. Tally is like you're going to count how often each value fits into a certain interval. And then you have what we call the frequency. I can't fit that in, so just write FREQ for now. frequency. Okay. The second way of graphically representing is what we call a histogram. And it is really a bar graph. Okay. Then the third one is a frequency polygon. Don't panic here with these words. Frequency polygon. It's basically a line graph. Line graph connecting midpoints. Zoom in a little bit more. And the last one is what we already did, is a line plot. You just have a number line. Label, mean, median, and mode. I'll just write that down right away so you don't forget. Okay. Okay. So let's jump straight into the example. The following data points represent the number of hours students study for the final exam. I'm just going to go up a bit. Okay, so here are the hours. Sometimes it could be a chart, sometimes it's just stated like this. The first one is 4.5. You got that right. It's 4.5, okay? Okay, so here we go. We're gonna embark in, we're gonna make all four graphic representations using this data set, okay? And they kind of, I would say that frequency table is kind of like the first thing you should be doing, because the frequency table allows you to make a histogram and a frequency polygon, right? But you first need that table before you graph, okay? So here we go. I would say calculate the MCTs plus the range first. That's what I would say. You're going to need to do this anyways. You might as well get it out of the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I think I'm going to put everything into L3 and leave L1 and L2 for now. I might use it again, so okay, so I entered all of that. I'm going to go stat, calc, one variable, and I'm going to go second 3 to call L3. And I get 5.96 hours. So my mean The mean number of hours studied is 5.96 hours. The median, I'm just going to go down and get that. That's 6 hours. Before I do the mode, right, I like to have the mode right next to them, but the range here, I'm just going to go and look at on my calculator. The max is 8 and the min is 2. So it's 6 hours is the range of hours studied. For the mode, make sure you sort first. I would do that. Sort the third one, then go stat, edit, and go look at the third column in this case. And I see 3 6s there. Okay. And 4 8s. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So that is my mode, the one and only. Okay. So I have the MCTs, they're all there. If I need to come back to them, that's great. Okay. So now I'm going to start with, I'm going to tell you how to make a frequency table. Consists of 3 columns. And they would be interval, tally, and frequency. The number of intervals I would call them rows, right? Should be between 5 and 12. I will make a note here because this one confuses some students from time to time. Okay? So I'll make a note. Note this is decided, right? This will be determined for you on a test quiz AC. So when I assign homework, it may be, they may not tell you how many columns you should be using or like how many intervals you should have. But on an AC or on a test, I tell you, right? I'll use 6 intervals, like that's basically what I will do. Okay, so that's the little note there. Another note, so this will be this is basically a bullet there. Another bullet is if a data point falls between 2 intervals, comma, place it in the lower one. And maybe if this doesn't make sense to you, just wait, okay? So this is the little note here. I will kind of put that in a bubble. Okay? And then we'll say I choose to have 6 intervals. For this example. And you will notice that that's going to be very common that I will ask for 6. If you have more, it's technically not wrong. I'll show you an example. Okay. So interval width basically is going to be high minus low, which is really the range, divided by number of intervals. So I'll put it this way, okay? If you want to, and you look on your screen, I'm going to put a slide on there for you. Of course, this now quit on me. Let me just check here. There it is. Let's say I'm going to present this to you first. Let me see here. So I'm going to stop presenting. And I'm going to present a different window. Oh, tab. There it is, Mark. Okay. Can you see the graph, the bar graph? Can somebody, a few of you just tell me on the chat? Yep, okay, thank you. All right. So this is like one of my old classes from years ago, right? Or years ago, maybe last year. Yeah, it's last year actually. And let's pretend like there's a chapter 7 test and this is what the graph would look like. So basically let's use percentage here. I'm just going to change this to percent. So we have, right, a 95 to 99% here if you look at my mouse, and then so these are the interval widths, right? And notice how many columns I used here. I used 20 for that, right? So notice what happens if I want to use fewer intervals. What happens to the width of the bars? You should notice that as I decrease the number of columns that I want to use, those bars get a little bit wider every time, right? So if I were to put all of the tests that this class wrote and I take the marks they got and I want to put that into 6 columns or 6 intervals, then this is what the graph would look like. If I wanted to put it into 10 intervals, you would have a bit more of a detailed graph appearing, right? So we kind of want to go anywhere between 5 and 12 columns to have a pretty good representation of what the data is trying to tell us. Okay, so technically all the graphs are acceptable, but depending on how many intervals you choose to include in your graph, the graph is going to look slightly different, right? So that's what I wanted to show you there. Now I'm going to stop presenting that, go back to my document camera. And unfortunately, this will not be on the video because I can't make that work. So I'm now taking you back to my camera. There we go. So this is how I come up with the interval width. Basically the width of the bar, the width of each bar is going to be, you know, it could be 5%, it could be 10%, it could be 2 hours, 3 hours, it depends, right? So the width in this case, if I choose to go with 6 intervals, high minus low, I already figured it out, it's 6, right? So high minus low, but I also want 6 intervals. So 8 minus 2 is 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1. Okay, so 1 hour, right? So each interval amounts to 1 hour. Yeah, this is the kicker. This is just a tool to help you come up with a decent interval. But you could say, well, I'd rather go with 2-hour intervals. Like I want 2-hour chunks. I want my column to be in 2-hour chunks. That's fine. Okay. But this is technically, if you kind of want to follow how my key is going to be, this is how we'll do it. So you take the highest minus the lowest, which is the range. You divide it by the number of columns you want, and then you go with that. Okay. Let's say you had picked 8. Then you would have gone 6 divided by 8. That's 0.75. And then it's just a weird number to go up by, right? But you can do that. So anyways, this is our interval width. So let's go and make our frequency table now. And this is what I will tell you to do. Okay? Go interval, tally, and frequency. And you'll notice that sometimes you end up with more than 6 columns, but that's fine. Okay, so have that there. Okay, and so you look at the lowest value you have, which is what? It's 2 hours, right? Everybody understand that? The lowest hours studies is 2. Don't start with the lowest. Go a little bit less than that. So I would say our first interval will be from 1 to 2 hours. Okay, then you're going to go from 2 to 3 hours. See, it's 1 hour interval. Then you're going to go from 3 to 4 hours, from 4 to 5 hours, from 5 to 6 hours, from 6 to 7 hours. I already have 6 columns here. Mr. Dirksen, you said 6. It's just to help you come up with a good interval. Why do I need to go one higher? Because the highest number of hours studied is 8. I know that. And until you have a category that will accommodate for it, you cannot stop. Okay? You need to make sure all your numbers will have a place in your chart. Okay, so that's your interval. Boom, right? And you have your tally. That should always be a little bit wider than the rest, and you'll see why. And frequency we do later. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of an aid here so that you don't need to, I don't know where you were writing this down on, but look at the top here. These are the hours I just gave you. Okay. I prefer to not use these ones because they're not arranged. It's a lot easier to use your calculator to help you put these values in here because you have already arranged them. So I'm actually going to go over to my calculator, go to the very lowest number, which is 2. 2 goes into, which one does it go into? It could be here, it could be there. And that's where the note told you, grab the lower category always. So you say, I have a value that fits into here. So that's one line. Then you go to number 4. Where does number 4 fit into? Well, there are 2 4s here. So that one I will count under that category. Then you go 4.5. 4.5 goes into this category. So you put a mark there. So for every number that you place somewhere, you put a little bar there so you count it. 5, there are actually 2 5s, right? So that would be, which one of these 2 would 5 fall under? And the answer is the lower bracket. So you have 2 5s, so you make 2 lines for each 5. You have 3 6s. And so again, where does the 6 fall under? Under the lower bracket. So it's 1, 2, 3. 3 6s. I have 1 7. I'll put that 7 here. I have 4 8s, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where the tally is. You're tallying, you're counting numbers as you're placing them in each interval. Then you do the frequencies, basically you add it up. So there's 1 in here, 0 in that category. You have 1 in that one, 3 in that one, 3 in this one, 1 here, and 4 there. How many numbers should we have? I'll complete this table now that I've done all my work. We should have 13 values. That's a good thing to check. Okay, so that's my frequency table right there. Obviously overkill here, but sometimes you will need a lot of space there. So I'm going to go 4 plus 1 is 5, 8, 11, 12, 13. So n is 13, right? 13 values that have been used altogether. Okay. So that's a frequency table right there. And probably the hardest part may be the finding the interval width. Well, if you just, let's say you just like, well, 2 to 8, I think 1 will work. I'm just going to go up by 1 every time. Perfect. Not if you wanted to go up by half an hour, right? Half an hour increments would double this thing. So you go from 1 to 1.5, 1.5 to 2, 2 to 2.5, and so forth. That's fine as well. Like as long as you're consistent, I'm fine. It's almost like the scale. When you pick a scale, as long as you're consistent, I wouldn't dock any marks. Same thing here. Okay. So now we're gonna do the histogram. Histogram. Along the x, you put the interval, and along the y, you put the frequency. Okay, and then you just make bars. Okay, so you'll see what I mean by that. So you grab your ruler, and you just make one of these, an x and a y axis. Okay, because along the x I will have interval, right? This is the hours studied, really. That's what the interval studied, right? Hours studied. And look at the numbers here. Let me just zoom out a little bit, okay? So you can see the whole thing. The lowest number is 1. It's very close to 0. So you can actually start right with 0 here and then just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? You can go one further if you want. It never hurts. But I'm just saying, like, I need to make sure I go all the way up to 8 hours here, right? Because the interval column here, which you can't see completely, but this interval column will be along the x-axis. So I go from 1, and this is a little weird, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? You go from 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, to 7, to 8, to 9, and so forth. I put the 9 down there, but it's not, if you stopped at 8, that would have been fine. Frequency, right? This is, what would this represent in this case? Frequency is how often something happens. And so for every hour studied, collected, that represents the number of students, right? Which is the frequency. In this case, it would be the number of students, okay? And then this is what I do. I go to my frequency table, and then from 1 to 2 hours, I only had 1. Oh, I need to come up with a scale. look at these numbers. The biggest number I'm going to have to account for, the tallest bar will have 4 entries. So I can actually go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Like I can actually go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Every line represents 1. So from 1 to 2 in that category, I have 1 instance. So you make your bar like this. Okay, and I put a number 1 on top. There's 1 instance, 1 student is studying anywhere between 1 and 2 hours. Then between 2 and 3, I've got nothing. Between 3 and 4, I have 1 again, so it should have the exact same height as the previous one. Okay. Between 4 and 5, I go up to my chart. I have 3 instances, so I kind of use this already, but I go all the way to 3. So if you need a ruler, you do that. I don't want wonky lines, okay? So 3, and then 5 to 6, I have another 3. Right? And then 6 to 7, I have 1. And 7 to 8, I have 4. And so now you need a frequency table to make this one, right? So even if I just went straight to make a histogram, you would have to go through the steps of coming up with a frequency table, okay? So this is your histogram, and 3 is a frequency polygon. Basically what you do is connect the midpoint of the intervals. Okay, connect the midpoints of the interval. So that I will actually allow you to do this. If you make a bar graph, all you need to do, I'm going to use a different color for this. I'm going to use red. I'm going to go to every single interval, like between 1 and 2, the interval would technically be 1.5. Essentially, it's halfway, right? So I'm going to make that halfway point. I'm going to focus in on halfway between. This bar, it doesn't have anything in it, but it is technically still an interval. And so I just go to the middle of every interval, right? Between 6 and 7, it's 6.5. Between 7 and 8, it's 7.5. And then this is what you need to do. You always need to start and end at the bottom. Okay, that's very important. Starts and ends in 0, right? With 0, in 0, whatever you want to say, right? So you grab this is where I need you to use a ruler, right? You connect the midpoints. So boom, right? Just connect the midpoints. So they're basically essentially telling us the same thing. One is just more of shows the trend, right? If this one focuses on the trend, okay? I should just say here for histogram, bars all have the same width. So you're basically picking the width up top when you're making a frequency table, and you stick with it, okay? You can't go from 1 to 2 and all of a sudden to 4, right? You have to go up by 1 if you choose to do so, right? So there's that. That's how you make one of those. Okay. The line plot, we just did that line plot on that previous example. So I think I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to do that tomorrow. So I will just leave a spot here for line plot. I will say see page 4, for example. Okay, it's done the exact same way, but I see my time as we're running out of time. So here is your homework, okay? Page 7 to 8 in the booklet, but I'm first going to confirm that that works out. Yeah, I'm going to get you to do 5 and 6, actually. Homework, page 5 to 6 in the booklet. Very important. I will post the key. And so, yeah, the line plot, and it's in the video as well, right? Like the video shows how to do a line plot. In this case, it'd be a lot easier because the numbers aren't so close together. So that